Hey there, and welcome to BingeBot. We recap all the latest and greatest TV shows to help keep you in the loop. It's time for a doozy today as we venture into our recap of Severance Season 2. Just in case it's been a while and you need a refresher, this show follows a group of workers at the futuristic and cult-like company called Lumon, who undergo a controversial procedure called Severance, which effectively splits their consciousness into two distinct halves. As a result, each worker has an innie consciousness who performs work while on company grounds, and an outie consciousness for the rest of life, neither one able to recall the memories of the other. Season 2 picks up shortly after the events of the Season 1 finale, which saw Mark, Helly, and other severed workers activating the secret overtime contingency, which granted their innies temporary control over their outies' bodies during off-work hours in search of answers, and now chaos is sure to follow. Let's see what consequences await as we dig deeper into the mysteries of Severance Season 2, starting with Episode 1, Hello, Miss Cobell. Sometime after the events of the Season 1 finale, Mark Scout's innie regains consciousness for the first time at Lumon, confused and slightly disoriented. After finding the wellness room completely empty, he returns to the macro data refinement department and runs into some unexpected faces. Instead of his usual co-workers, he's instead greeted by three new colleagues, Mark W., Gwendolyn, and Dario. Whisked away by Mr. Milchick, Mark also meets a new supervisor, Miss Huang, whose notably young age strikes immediate suspicion. In his office, Mr. Milchick tells Mark that he is now the manager of the severed floor, since Harmony Cobell was fired from Lumon due to her being caught spying on Mark's outie. Despite Milchick's explanations and assurances of their safety, Mark grows suspicious and demands to see his old team, but Milchick denies.
Well, I'd like to hear it from them.
That's not possible. Enjoy your balloons.
Over the next few shifts, Mark tries to stay calm, but his suspicion cannot be deterred. One morning, while everyone is distracted, he makes a mad dash to Milchick's office and uses the intercom speaker to contact the board, making a desperate plea to see his team again. Though reprimanded by Milchick, the plan actually works, and at the start of the next shift, Dylan steps off the elevator, looking equally confused. Irving arrives soon after, as well as Helly, and the group is ushered to the newly renovated break room to meet with Mr. Milchick. There, the reunited MDR team learn that as an apology for how they've been treated in the past, severed workers have been granted extra workplace rights, the most important of which is the hall pass reform, giving severed workers full reign of the entire floor.
By end of day, each of you will choose whether you want to remain here. Not your outies, but you. If you start work on your file, I'll assume you want to stay. If not, I'll send you to the surface. No ill will.
Afterward, the MDR team catch up on recent events and talk about what they learned during the overtime contingency. Mark tells them that his outie's wife, Gemma, died a few years ago. However, he found a wedding photo, and his supposedly dead wife is actually Miss Casey. Helly, deciding to lie about her outie's true identity as Helena Egan, daughter of Lumon's CEO, tells them that her outie lives a boring, normal life. When Irving gets emotional over his memory of the outside world and tries to leave altogether, Dylan stops him, and in a touching conversation, Irving finally spills his secret, telling Dylan that his outie was plagued by visions of a blackened hallway with an ominous elevator at the end, and now that he can no longer see Bert, he just wants things to end. However, Dylan pleads with him to not give up hope. Even though everyone is granted the option to leave Lumon and never look back, the entire MDR team choose to stay, invigorated by their individual motivations for deeper truth. And so, sitting down at their desks, they get back into the groove of refining. Mark, booting up a particular folder called Cold Harbor, which sits at 67% completion, finally gets back to work, with all the familiar faces keeping him company. Episode 2, Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. Flashing back to moments after the overtime contingency, Mark's outie regains his composure while his sister Devon tries to comfort him and make sense of the situation. At the same time, after being confronted by her intimidating father, James Egan, Helly's outie, Helena, meets with Harmony Cobell and tries to make peace. Miss Cobell is not so eager to rejoin the company. Meanwhile, Mr. Milchick tries to do some damage control and goes to visit both Irving and Mark and explain the situation. While Irving is polite enough, Mark and Devon are appropriately combative, feeling violated by Lumon's policies and the invasion of privacy from Miss Cobell's spying. That same night, back at Lumon, Helena watches surveillance footage of her innie on the severed floor, and upon seeing Helly and Mark kiss, she is seemingly smitten by the display of affection. The next day, Mark meets with Devon for lunch, but their conversation turns heated. While Mark is thinking about quitting his job at Lumon, Devon is disturbed by the notion that Gemma could still be alive and urges him to discover the truth. And distraught, Mark leaves, rattled by the morbid thought. Later that night, while Irving's outie makes a shady call using a phone booth, he is followed by none other than Bert. When Mark returns home, he gets another visit from Mr. Milchick, who convinces him to keep working at Lumon.
The Mark I've come to know at Lumon is happy. He cares for people. And he's funny. He knows nothing of the pain I see in you right now.
When morning comes, Mark arrives at Lumon, and from the upper floors of the building, Helena watches on, stating that they just need Mark to work long enough to complete the Cold Harbor project file. This loops us back to the beginning of the previous episode, with Mark meeting his new team, breaking protocol to appeal to the board, and reuniting with the old MDR crew before settling back into refinement. Then, one night after work, Mark returns home and notices Mrs. Selvig / Miss Cobell picking up some things in her driveway. Confronting her about the last 2 years of constant deception, Mark demands answers, but Cobell gives him the cold shoulder and tries to drive off. Blocking her car, he bluntly asks if she knows anything about Gemma's death, and after a startled look of guilt and recognition, Cobell slams on the gas, nearly hitting Mark, and speeds off into the night. Episode 3. Who is Alive? At Lumon, Mark and Helly begin to search the severed floor for any information about Miss Casey. Arriving in his office, Mr. Milchick is greeted by Natalie, serving as a representative for the board. In an attempt to make Milchick feel better connected to Lumon's history, the board gives him a series of paintings that depict the company's founder, Keir, as an African-American man. And unsure of what to make of the awkward gift, Milchick searches for words of gratitude, but the board ends the meeting unceremoniously. Meanwhile, Mark and Helly continue their search, and after crawling through a dirty passage, they are surprised to find a lush indoor field where baby goats graze freely, watched over by a Lumon employee named Lorne. Though cagey at first, Lorne eventually explains that they're in a department called Mammalians Nurturable, and although she recognizes the image of Miss Casey, she and her colleagues haven't seen her since she supposedly retired. While this is happening, Dylan earns a visitation session with his Audie's wife, Gretchen, and in an awkward but wholesome meeting, he learns a bit more about his life outside of Lumon. More importantly though, Irving takes a trip to optics and design and reunites with Felicia, sharing the news about Miss Casey and reminiscing about past memories of Bert. As Felicia leafs through Irving's sketchbook, she recognizes a drawing of the ominous hallway and identifies it as the Exports Hall, her mood turning from joyful to deadly serious. That night, Miss Cobell returns to Lumon in order to reclaim her old job, and although Helena welcomes her back with open arms, Cobell feels something amiss and rushes back to her car, never to return. Elsewhere, Mark's brother-in-law, Rickon, meets with Natalie to discuss a Lumon-approved version of his self-help book, designed specifically for innies. Devin in particular disapproves though and tells Mark all about it while he works on a new project. In order to bypass Lumon's security system and find some way of passing information to his innie, Mark plans to temporarily burn the phrase "who is alive" into his retinas before heading into work. However, while practicing in the car, he is confronted by Ragabi, the ex-Lumon employee who performed reintegration on his friend Petey. After scolding Mark for nearly blinding himself, Ragabi confirms his suspicions and claims that Gemma is very much alive. To discover the truth, Ragabi finally convinces Mark to attempt reintegration, a dangerous and experimental procedure that essentially reverses Severance, and so they set up shop in his basement. As Ragabi monitors his brainwaves and asks him a series of questions, Mark initially notices nothing abnormal, but before long, things take a dramatic turn. Rapidly disassociating, with his perception swapping between innie and outie, Mark suddenly finds himself sitting in Lumon, his sense of reality completely shattered. Episode 4. Woe's Hollow. Due to their desire to see the outside world, the MDR team innies are treated to an outdoor retreat and team building occurrence, or ORTBO for short, located in the exceptionally frigid Dieter-Egan National Forest. With express permission from their outies, Mark and his colleagues are granted 2 days to enjoy the forest, and according to an orientation video from Mr. Milchick, there's even a sacred Lumon text, normally forbidden on the severed floor, hidden in the nearby Scissor Cave for them to discover.
That it is forbidden upon the severed floor. It's waiting for you in Scissor Cave.
Guided by strange, unsettling projections of themselves, the group make their way to the cave and, following cryptic instructions, begin a scavenger hunt of sorts, following in the footsteps of Lumon founder Keir Egan and his mysterious twin brother, Dieter. During their adventure, Irving grows increasingly distrustful of Helly, but they soon arrive at Woe's Hollow Waterfall, where they meet with Mr. Milchick and rest for the night. Over a campfire, Milchick reads a chapter from the sacred Fourth Appendix book, but when Helly and Mark find it oddly funny, he punishes the team by destroying their marshmallows, and afterward, Irving continues to press Helly and suggests that she's hiding something. Following this, Mark visits Helly in her tent, and after months of tension, the pair finally get intimate. However, in their post-coital embrace, Mark experiences a flash of reintegration and is surprised to see Gemma's face instead of Helly's. The next morning, Mark, Dylan, and Mr. Milchick wake up to find both Helly and Irving missing, and quickly begin to search the area. Meanwhile, down in Woe's Hollow, Irving confronts Helly. Reaching his breaking point, he drags Helly to the water's edge, and as Mr. Milchick and the rest arrive, he threatens to drown her, claiming that she's actually an outie. As Irving dunks her head into the water with conviction, Milchick scrambles to grab his walkie-talkie and orders an unseen person to remove the Glasgow block. In a flash, Helly's consciousness switches to her innie, and Irving pulls her from the water, proving that she's been an outie spy for the past few weeks. Despite the revelation, Irving is immediately reprimanded by Milchick, who fires him on the spot, and so, as his friends watch on, Irving is ordered to walk into the forest, and at Milchick's signal, his innie's consciousness is obliterated, effectively killing the Irving that we know and love.
Now.
Episode 5, Trojan's Horse. After the events of the Ortbo, Helena meets with her superior, Mr. Drummond, and Natalie, who tell her that Mark is getting close to finishing the Cold Harbor file, with his current progress at 81%. But fearing that he will not work without his true team, they force Helena back to work at MDR, marking Helly R's real return to the severed floor. In his office, Mr. Milchick explains to the MDR team that Helly's outie is in fact the daughter of James Egan, and explains away the usage of the Glasgow block, which allowed Helena to keep her outie consciousness while on the severed floor.
Helena Egan, in her executive capacity, was conducting valuable research.
By stealing my body?
Was she spying on us?
Wait, what?
The whole time. It's called a Glasgow block.
Helly is left feeling violated, while Dylan remains upset about Irving's firing and demands that they hold a funeral to pay their respects. To smooth things over, Mr. Milchick and Miss Huang comply, organizing a brief service for Irving in the break room. Although Dylan delivers a heartfelt eulogy, Mark is notably distant, and when Helly confronts him about it later, he admits that he's finding it very hard to trust her, with mixed feelings over the recent deception. Back in the break room, Dylan finds a hidden note left behind by Irving with written directions to the mysterious exports hallway. Later that day, Mr. Milchick has his first review meeting as a floor manager, and as expected, Mr. Drummond has some issues with his performance. In addition to his improper etiquette with paper clips and the usage of too many big words, Milchick is reprimanded for the outcome of the Ortbo, and Drummond encourages him to be more firm in the future, stating that Mark's completion of Cold Harbor will be viewed as one of the most important events in the history of mankind. That night, outside of Lumon, Devin continues to argue with Rickon about the new version of his book, which Rickon sees as a sort of Trojan's horse that could beget an innie revolution, while Devin sees it as plain propaganda. Elsewhere, Irving's outie makes another call to his unknown contact at the phone booth, but notices Bert lurking in his car nearby. When Irving goes to confront him, Bert plainly explains that he only started following him after Irving's innie came banging on his doorstep during the overtime contingency. And looking to hash out the situation, Bert kindly invites Irving over for dinner, and the pair part ways. Meanwhile, Mark discusses the reintegration process with Ragabi, who is now temporarily staying in his basement. Suddenly, he is overcome with a hallucination and finds himself on the severed floor of Lumon. Guided by a disembodied voice, he is shocked when he comes face to face with Gemma, who appears as Miss Casey, and pulled back to reality, is left an emotional wreck at the sight of his long-lost wife.
Your outie is going to be...
Episode 6, Attila. At work the next day, Mark continues to suffer reintegration sickness, and as Dylan tells them about Irving's note in the break room, his reality continues to shift.
You okay?
Afterward, in a private conversation, Mark admits to Helly that he slept with her outie during the Ortbo, and although Helly is heartbroken at first, she tells Mark that she wants her own first-time experience with him. So, after finding an unused office and making an impromptu tent out of the plastic covers, Helly and Mark get intimate. At the same time, Dylan has another visitation with his outie's wife, and unexpectedly, the pair also kiss. Following their on-the-clock quickie, Mark gets a nosebleed, and as Miss Huang performs some basic first aid, his reality shifts yet again, and he finds himself in his basement with Ragabi during another reintegration session. As his memory of Lumon fades, Mark laments the lack of progress, and Ragabi suggests a more invasive procedure, which would involve flooding the Severance chip in his head, but he deems it too extreme. Meanwhile, Irving meets with Bert and his husband Fields for dinner. Over the meal, the trio get to know each other, and a bit drunk on wine, Fields lets it slip that Burt has been working for Lumon for over 20 years, even though the severance procedure was only invented a little over a decade ago. When Fields gets emotional, suggesting that Burt and Irving's innies might have been intimate at work, Irving takes his leave. At the same time, Mark goes to a local Chinese restaurant for food, where he runs into none other than Helena Egan, and feeling an insidious undertone to the conversation, he rushes back home. There, he agrees to let Ragabi flood the severance chip in his brain, and she performs the procedure. Just as she finishes, Devin arrives unannounced, and as Mark reels from the side effects, he collapses onto the floor, with Ragabi and Devin rushing to his aid. Episode 7, Chick-High Bardo. Flashing back to the past, we witness the beginning of Mark and Gemma's relationship, where they first met while donating blood, but in the present, Devin panics over Mark's state as she meets Ragabi for the first time, who tells her that Mark is okay and that Gemma is still alive. However, in the morning, Devin continues to press Ragabi for information and brings up a birthing cabin where severed people become innies, stating that perhaps Harmony Cobell could help them find it. When Devin insists on taking control of the situation, Ragabi gets fed up and leaves, abandoning Mark in his vulnerable condition. At Lumon, Gemma spends her days on the secretive testing floor, where she wakes up and attends tests in various named rooms, overseen by the mysterious Dr. Maurer. When arriving in each different room, it seems as though she has a different consciousness for each, with no memory shared between her various innies. Later, it is revealed that the MDR team has been closely monitored through surveillance by Mr. Drummond and Dr. Maurer, who takes a particular liking to Gemma. During a checkup with Dr. Maurer, Gemma points out that she has visited every single testing room so far, except for a new one, labeled Cold Harbor. In another series of flashbacks, Gemma and Mark continue their relationship, and Gemma eventually becomes pregnant. Unfortunately, there is a complication, and Gemma has a miscarriage, breaking her and Mark's hearts. After some time, the couple decide to seek help at a Lumon-backed fertility center and begin treatments. However, their situation does not improve, leading to a strained marriage and constant stress. Back in the present, Dr. Maurer comes to Gemma's headquarters and in a cold-hearted lie, tells her that Mark has moved on with his life and has fallen in love with another woman. Feeling trapped and refusing to believe him, Gemma knocks him out cold, steals his key card, and attempts to escape.
He dies at the end.
Though chased by a nurse, she successfully makes her way to an elevator, and reaching the top, she finds herself in the exports hallway on the severed floor, with her innie consciousness switched to Miss Casey. When she attempts to exit the hall, she is blocked by Mr. Milchick, who explains away the situation and sends her back down the elevator. Regaining her normal consciousness as she re-enters the testing floor, Gemma realizes that there's no escape. In a final flashback, Gemma leaves the house for an event, while Mark opts to stay behind and do some work. Hours pass, and when a car finally pulls up to the driveway and Mark goes to check, he is shocked to see 2 police officers at his door, undoubtedly bringing grim news of Gemma's car accident. When Mark finally opens his eyes in the present and regains his bearings with Devin at his side, he is overcome with emotion, unable to shake the vivid memories of Gemma and their once happy life together. Episode 8, Sweet Vitriol. After driving through a snow-covered countryside, Harmony Cobell arrives in a tiny town called Salt's Neck. Once a prosperous company town in decades past, thanks to the now closed Lumon Ether Mill, Salt's Neck has since fallen into poverty and disrepair. Outside of the old mill, Cobell meets with her old friend Hampton, where it is revealed that they both grew up in Salt's Neck and even worked at the Ether Mill together, as Lumon despicably utilized child labor. Fearing that Lumon still has eyes all over the place, Cobell has Hampton smuggle her to her childhood home, where she reunites with her estranged aunt and Lumon loyalist, Sissy. Showcasing their obviously strained relationship, she argues with her aunt, who stayed behind in Salt's Neck to watch over Harmony's ailing mother, who has since passed away. Heartbroken that she never got the chance to say goodbye, Cobell enters her mother's room upstairs and lies on her deathbed, sucking on an old oxygen tube in a tragic display of grief. As day turns to night, Cobell breaks into the old outdoor cellar and recovers a tattered notebook. In an effort to prove Lumon's corruption, she takes the book inside and shows it to Sissy, who is somewhat stunned by what she sees. Scribbled within the pages are tons of scientific calculations and diagrams proving that it was actually Harmony who was the true inventor of Severance, and that Lumon simply stole her work and passed it off as their own. Refusing to betray her belief in Lumon though, Sissy tries to burn the book, but Cobell retrieves it and leaves. As she drives away in her car, Devin and Mark finally reach her by phone and desperately request her help. Episode 9. The After Hours. At Lumon, Miss Wong learns from Mr. Milchick that her seasonal internship on the severed floor has ended, and after finishing the day, she'll be forced to move out of her parents' house and relocate to an out-of-country training center. With this, we realize that Miss Wong, while a bit odd, is nothing more than an unlucky child who was born into a family under Lumon's cult-like control, leading to a life of dedicated, unquestioning labor. Meanwhile, Irving comes home and finds Bert inside, unannounced, who has found his personal notebook full of evidence against Lumon. When Bert nonchalantly asks Irving to join him for a car ride, he sees no other choice but to accept. Though his motives are unclear at first, Bert takes Irving to a train station and buys him a ticket to the furthest stop possible. In an effort to protect him from Lumon, he tells Irving to hop aboard and never look back, and though heartbroken, he follows Bert's advice and sets off to destinations unknown. Back at Lumon, Cold Harbor sits at 96% completion, but Mark is nowhere to be found, drawing the ire of Dr. Maurer, Mr. Drummond, and others. At the same time, in the visitation room, Dylan meets with Gretchen, but she offers nothing but bad news. After she told Dylan's outie about their kiss, Gretchen decides that she can no longer visit Dylan's innie at work, leaving him completely dejected, and as a result, he visits Mr. Milchick's office immediately afterward and hands in his resignation. Back in MDR, Helly visits the break room and recovers Irving's note, but when she tries to memorize the directions at her desk, she is shocked to receive a surprise visit from James Egan.
You tricked me. My Helly.
Elsewhere, Devin and Mark finally meet up with Miss Cobell, who promises to take them to the birthing cabin, where they'll be able to communicate with Mark's innie. Although appropriately hesitant to join forces at first, the trio form a tentative alliance, and after Mark calls Mr. Milchick and explains away his absence, the group move forward with the plan. As night falls, Cobell successfully smuggles Devin and Mark to the cabin, and once inside, Mark's innie consciousness immediately awakens. As he tries to make sense of the situation, Devin guides him upstairs, where Miss Cobell prepares for the next crucial step. Episode 10. Cold Harbor. In the cabin, Cobell explains that they need innie Mark's help to rescue Gemma from Lumon and tells him the plan. Upon completing the Cold Harbor file, innie Mark will make his way to the testing floor, where outie Mark will take over, rescue Gemma, return to the severed floor, and innie Mark will guide her to the exit stairwell. However, innie Mark is reluctant to cooperate as he realizes that if Lumon is shut down, he and the rest of the innies will effectively die. Using a digital camera as a middleman between his outie and innie, Mark has a conversation with himself, but it doesn't go according to plan. Innie Mark feels like his life and the lives of his friends are being disregarded in exchange for Gemma, someone he really doesn't know, and this feeling only amplifies when outie Mark brings up Helly in a condescending fashion.
This life it's all we have, and we don't want it to end. Can you understand that?
To further convince him, Cobell sits innie Mark down and reveals one of the biggest secrets of all. It turns out that the numbers that Mark and his team refine are actually a digital representation of Gemma's mind, and each file they complete builds a new Gemma innie for the testing floor to use, with Cold Harbor being the last. Cobell assures innie Mark there'll be no happy ending regardless of his actions, but he storms off in disbelief and steps outside, ending the meeting altogether. Immediately, innie Mark finds himself in the elevator at work and stepping out into the view of a brand new mural. He is soon met by Helly after her brief conversation with James Egan, who coldly admitted that he doesn't love his daughter anymore. Together, they head to MDR where, after an emotional conversation with Helly about their future, Mark starts to finish the Cold Harbor file. At the same time, Mr. Milchick gives Dylan a resignation response letter from his outie. In it, Dylan's outie empathizes with his innie and they find common ground, ultimately giving him permission to resign, but with the hope that he sees things through instead. Back in MDR, Mark continues to refine, and with Helly by his side, he categorizes the final cluster, and Cold Harbor reaches 100% completion. After an awkward speech from a creepy animatronic of Keir Egan, who is joined by Mr. Milchick, Mark's accomplishment is celebrated with a performance from the Choreography and Merriment Department Marching Band. Seeing an opportunity, Helly creates a distraction by stealing Milchick's walkie-talkie and trapping him in the bathroom thanks to some help from Dylan, while Mark heads towards the testing floor using Irving's directions. On the testing floor, Gemma gets dressed in familiar clothes and heads to the Cold Harbor test room, where inside, she finds a wooden baby crib. Guided by the voice of Dr. Maurer, Gemma's new innie is tasked with deconstructing the crib, while James Egan also watches on from a monitor. At the same time, Mr. Drummond meets with Lorne, who begrudgingly offers him a baby goat, which they plan to sacrifice with a bolt gun. However, when Drummond catches Mark snooping around in the hallway, he starts to beat him senseless, leading to a bloody fight. Drummond eventually overpowers Mark and tries to strangle him, but he is saved by Lorne, who bravely defends herself and her baby goat. Taking Drummond hostage with the bolt gun, Mark boards the elevator at the end of the exports hallway, but midway through the ride, his consciousness switches and the gun goes off, killing Drummond in a gruesome display. Covered in blood, outie Mark makes his way to the Cold Harbor testing room, and after years of believing that she was dead and gone, he is finally reunited with Gemma.
Don't speak to that man. He's here to hurt you.
We have to go.
Stop!
Instinctively trusting Mark, Gemma makes her way out of the Cold Harbor room and regains her normal outie consciousness, leading to another touching moment of reunion. As the alarms sound, Mark and Gemma flee the testing floor, and arriving back on the severed floor, innie Mark guides the oblivious Miss Casey innie to the stairwell. Escorting her through the door, Miss Casey becomes outie Gemma once more, but innie Mark hesitates, unsure of whether or not to follow. When Helly appears, he is forced to make a choice: step through the exit and let outie Mark escape with his wife, or stay behind with Helly. In a shocking turn, innie Mark walks back towards Helly, abandoning Gemma as she screams and begs in confusion. And together, hand in hand, Mark and Helly sprint down the hallway, unsure of the future, but ready to face it together. And that's it for Severance Season 2. So, what did everyone think? Were you guys satisfied with the second season and the answers therein, or did you think it failed to live up to the hype? Either way, it seems like we got more questions than answers, but hopefully everything will be resolved in Season 3. We'll have the recap of that ready for you whenever the new season drops, but in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to our channel for other recaps, or just drop us a like. If you want to support our channel further, you can do so via YouTube memberships, Patreon, or Buy Me a Coffee, and unlock some cool perks along the way. Thanks for checking out our recap and for watching through until the end. We'll be back soon, but until then, BingeBot is logging off.